History and Ethical Implications of Staff and Parent Training and Behavior Analysis, written by Priya Yogi. Behavior analysts live and work by a set of core ethical principles and values. Relevant to this paper and ongoing staff and parent training, this includes do no harm, respecting autonomy, benefiting others, being just, being truthful, according to dignity, treating others with caring and compassion, pursuit of excellence, and accepting responsibility. So you don't want to hurt our clients. We want to respect their independence and promote their independence. We want to make sure that we're not only benefiting our clients, but we're benefiting their family, we're benefiting society, their teachers, and everybody else in the world. We want to be just. We want to be truthful. We want to make sure that the things that we're doing are honest. We want to make sure that the things that we are doing are right. We go by according to dignity. We want to respect their dignity. We don't want to do anything that indignifies the client, that makes them look bad and everything else. We want to treat them with caring and compassion. We want to pursue excellence. We want to make sure that we are providing the best treatments, that we're staying up to date with research. We want to make sure that we are using that research and applying it to individualized treatment programs. And we want to accept responsibility for our clients. So going into this, my thesis is that ongoing staff and parent training are crucial for ethical practices and consistent and effective treatment to ensure the best quality of life for the client and promote independence. By doing all this, we adhere to our ethical core principles and values. We increase our social validity, and we have positive media representations. We benefit everybody in society, including the family, the school, the client, ourselves, and behavior analysts in general. So what happens when there's insufficient training for parents and the therapists? Oftentimes there's miscommunication. It can be miscommunication between the supervisor and the staff regarding the treatment that leads to unethical practices and inconsistent intervention procedures, which can mean that we are resulting in abuse and neglect and unethical practices or reinforcement of behaviors. And there can be miscommunication between the supervisor and staff to parents about treatment, which can result in misinformation about ABA, bad media representation, and result in parents terminating services from these misconceptions that they are hearing. This can be really negative and detrimental to a client's progress and treatment, and it can result in regression or even just no progression at all. Parents continue to reinforce problem behavior when not well trained. So, we're working really hard in the clinic to make sure that we are implementing these extinction procedures and promoting that functional communication training. The kid goes home, they ask for a parent's attention, they don't give them attention, and they don't reinforce the functional communication for attention, so the kid tantrums. Or the kid tantrums and the parent then gives them attention. Either or, it means that there's not consistency and that the reinforcement of problem behaviors mean that behavior is going to continue to occur, and that we're going to have more extinction bursts than we would like to see at work because they are reinforcing behavior at home. There can also end up being allegations of abuse and neglect, and this can be seen later on when I will talk about some of the historical cases. So we're going to move on to talking about some of my experiences with staff and parent training. To begin with, we're going to talk about some of my experiences with staff training. At my company, we have a very thorough staff training program, which includes weekly overlaps with either the BCBA, assistant supervisor, or the therapist liaison, as well as the therapist and the client. This is to ensure quality assurance, and we try to do this once a week with every therapist. Sometimes that's not feasible, but that is our main goal. We also have monthly staff trainings that utilize BST. We go over one general training topic a month, whether it's banding, TCT, national environment training, behavior modification, It's very different every month, but it's a 2-hour training where we utilize FBSC. We have weekly management meetings that include the BCBA, assistant supervisor, therapist liaison, and our management staff, including our operations manager and administrative coordinator. And we discuss some of the therapists that we think are doing an outstanding job, doing an okay job, and some that definitely need some more support with either all clients or client specific. We then also have monthly mentor meetings where we review one-on-one with the therapists, their strengths, their weaknesses, areas that we want to work on. We discuss their SMART goals. We typically develop between 3 and 5 SMART goals for them to work on. And the timeliness of them varies depending on what the goal is. So it's not like we expect them to meet all 3 to 5 goals within a month. It really varies greatly on what they need to work on and the therapists themselves. We also have IOA data on programs and behaviors. So during these weekly overlaps that were mentioned for the first bullet point, we take IOA data on these programs and behaviors. So I'll be tracking non-compliance with the therapist to make sure that we're both tracking it accordingly and consistently. And then I'll also take data on either on DTT, NAT programs, or TAs that are being implemented and make sure that we're getting the same results from these programs. So if I'm counting something correct, the therapist is counting it incorrect and unbounding, that's something that we will end up discussing afterwards, and we'll make sure that there's consistency throughout and provide that ongoing training. So now we're going to move on to parent trainings, and these can be kind of tricky, either to get parents to come to have them actually implement the things that they're learning, or they could be absolutely fabulous. So I have a variety of cases here. I have an advanced learner, but the parents not so much. They've been trained quite often. They've been in ABA, or one or more of their kids have been receiving services for 10-some-odd years, and they still just can't quite implement the behavior intervention plans for the baby of the family. So making sure that we have these consistent parent trainings and possibly a functional analysis of their behavior, we'll talk about that later in the future directions, might be beneficial. Or you have the constant cancelers that reinforce the problem behavior because, they're maybe afraid of their kid, or they're a little bit older and just not able to make it as often. Maybe they're just a busy family, and so they really intend to do good. They really, really want to, but they just don't quite have that motivating operation there to do so. Then you have parents that do want to help their kid. They all really do. Let's be honest. But they have a learning history. Their kid's been autistic for 14 years, but just received the diagnosis in the last year, so they have a learning history of reinforcing that behavior. They see the training, they try the training, they're good at implementing it, and then you walk in the house and you see them reinforcing behavior. It's in one ear and out the other. Then you got the other parents that just get it. They see what we're doing here at the clinic, they attend those parent trainings, the clinics, and they share their experiences at home, and we observe them as well. We see that generalization and maintenance of not only skill acquisition lessons, but as well as the behavior modification programs, which can be really, really awesome. Next, we're going to move on to some of the historical cases that are relevant to staff and parent training. I'm going to go ahead and start with Wyatt versus Stickney in 1972. And we talked about this one a lot in class, so I'm going to very briefly go over some of these cases because they were all in her article that we ended up reading. So the outcome of this case was that the program was conducted under the supervision, or the programs need to be conducted under the supervision and in the presence of a qualified mental retardation professional who was properly trained in such techniques. So that means that anybody who is implementing behavior analytic services, particularly aversive consequences in behavior intervention programs, they need to be supervised and be trained. And the people that are training need to be doing the supervision, and the people that are implementing also need to be thoroughly trained. Moving on, there was Butler versus Circulus in 1977, and this case went through the Mississippi Court of Appeals, and it ended up stating that you need to make sure that you have qualified and trained staff well supervised to ensure that you are not having any false allegations or accusations going against them. You need to make sure that these staff are well trained and qualified and supervised, because otherwise people can come in and say, there was assault and battery, there was negligence, there was this and that, but if there was informed consent and that these modification techniques were being implemented properly, then you have a defense. You have that consent, you have everything done that was necessary, including the training, the supervision, and that consent. Then there was the Leas versus Kavanaugh in 1987. The results of this case were that there needs to be quality and quantity of behavior modification services, because in this case, the quality and the quantity of behavior modification services fell below acceptable standards and caused clients harm. So to prevent any harm, do no harm, ethical core value there, we need to make sure that we are providing quality services, that we are providing the quantity, the treatment hours necessary or prescribed for this client. We need to make sure that we are doing a good job of this, and in order to do so, we need proper staff training and supervision. In the Homeward Bound versus Hissam Memorial Center in 1987, the outcomes included that there needed to be parent training on any issue pertinent to positively maintaining the child at home or the adult in his or her own home. There needs to be systematic communication between behavior intervention team, human and legal rights committees, advisory committees, client advisory boards, and others. So more or less anybody that is working with this client needs to be in direct communication. That's why we collaborate with psychiatrists, the OT, the PT, the SLPs, the school, the social worker, the parents. We need to make sure everybody's involved. That way we are all communicating and providing the best treatment plan that is consistent across all boards. We also want to make sure that there are quality assurance mechanisms. I talked about this in my personal experiences. We need to make sure that there is that supervision to make sure that the therapists or whoever is working with the client are providing quality treatment to the client, and that they are implementing these treatment programs effectively. Lastly, there was the necessity for education and training of consumers, parents, staff, advisory committees, and governing boards on the rights of the clients. Parents need to be trained on the rights of the clients. More recently, I ran into a parent who did not know that their child has a right to an aide in a classroom. Due to the IDEA and different changes within BCBS, we are no longer allowed within the schools as a one-on-one aide, because the schools should be able to provide that one-on-one aide that is necessary for the client. This is due to the IDEA and all of our disability acts that are in place for schools. So it's really important that these parents are aware of their clients' rights. It's also, of course, important for us and anybody working with the clients to be aware of their rights and to respect their rights. So I'm briefly going to go over some of the federal and state laws and principles that were included that are relevant to us. So that is assault and battery. We need to make sure that there's informed consent on any of the restraints or holds that are being used with our client, the consequence and implications of behavior intervention plans. So if we're putting our clients in hold, we need to make sure that the parents or the guardians or the client themselves are signing off and consenting to this. Otherwise, we can be charged with assault and battery. If there is informed consent, then it protects us from charges of assault and battery unless proved otherwise in the court of law. Negligence is kind of goes to the same thing as that. We need to make sure that we have this informed consent, and that if we're using plan ignoring, that it is informed and consented upon by whoever is responsible, so that it is not considered negligence. Otherwise, we will be held responsible for this. Clients also have a right to adequate treatment. So this means that they are actually benefiting from the treatments that are being implemented within their services and their treatment program. They have a protection from harm, so we are not to do anything that was mentioned in the Sunland Miami case or in any of the cases that were previously mentioned within the Board of Historical Cases. We want to make sure that they're not sniffing soiled underwear, that they're not being all human citizens, and we have human rights, and we need to follow their basic human rights. And so now we move on to the good stuff, the research in staff training. First, I looked into an article by Ducharme and Feldman in 1992, which looked into general case training versus single case training, as well as a few other kinds. But overall, it kind of looked at the cases that were presented during a training program. There could be a single case with one child with a couple of specific behaviors or one specific behavior, which is single case training, versus general case training, which is a handful of clients with a handful of behaviors and the different intervention procedures. The results yielded that the general case training, or GCT, was more effective in staff generalization and maintenance of skills. This is because they had access to multiple clients with behaviors, that they were able to generalize the skills of behavior training and lesson or skill acquisition implementation. They're able to generalize these across clients. So they're able to have one advanced learner and one learner that is not as advanced and takes a lot more time with some of these DTT programs. Maybe they master 3 exemplars a month compared to the advanced learner who's mastering 13 exemplars in 1 month. And they're able to generalize the different implementations across clients, as well as the behavior implementation across clients. This is important because staff need to be able to generalize training skills across clients to ensure quality services. We need to make sure that the services that are provided are not only benefiting one client, but they're benefiting every single client that the staff members work with. There was another case by Vladescu, I'm hoping, Carroll, Patton, and Kodak in 2012, which looked at video modeling with voiceover, which is similar to what we're doing here, minus the video modeling part. And that's where, let's say, they record a video of somebody tying their shoe with a voiceover, and so they see somebody tying their shoe, and they're like, all right, pull the strings tight, cross them, let them go, put one string under the other, pull it tight, make a loop with one hand, take the other string, wrap it around, etc. So there's a voiceover that is giving like directive prompts along with video modeling so that the client can see it, or the staff can see it. The results showed that participants reached mastery criteria of the target skill and generalized this across skills. So it's not just across shoe tying, maybe it's also, which is generally a TA, maybe it's also across DT, NET, across adaptive skills like dishwashing, or something as simple as, I don't know, putting on a t-shirt. And this is important because both staff and clients benefit from this training. So staff were able to meet mastery criteria for their target behavior during this training, but also clients were meeting their mastery criteria of the target skills that were being taught. So this was really awesome because it shows that everybody participating in this training of video modeling with voiceover is benefiting from this procedure, and that the treatment is being delivered effectively. To continue the research on staff training, there was a study conducted by Reed and Henley, which was actually a survey of staff training and performance management practices. So this included performance and competency-based training, PCBT, and behavioral skills training, BST. We've already talked about BST a little bit here, but it ended up looking at the two, and the PCBT actually included 6 steps rather than the couple of steps that the behavioral skills training. They're very similar procedures overall, and it didn't compare the two against each other. It just looked at a survey of the results, and it resulted in the efficacy of staff training produces improvements for trainees as well as clients. So again, this is important because it reaches the ethical standpoint of staff being competent, that the quality of services being provided benefit the client as well as society as a whole. So when the client benefits and it starts to reach that mastery criteria, the skills can be generalized and maintained. And when that starts to happen, it can benefit society as a whole as well, because they become functional members of society independently. Then there was a case by Haberlin Beauchamp, Agnew, and O'Brien in 2012. This one looked at pyramidal training versus direct staff training. So pyramidal training is when an outside consultant comes in and trains the BCBA, who then trains the actual staff that are going to be working underneath them, versus direct staff training is an outside consultant training the direct line staff, like our therapists and whatnot. It ended up finding that pyramidal training resulted in staff maintaining improved teaching skills significantly more than the direct staff training group. This is because the BCBA, who is trained by that direct consultant, is able to provide that ongoing supervision and staff training, whereas when direct staff training has the consultant come in and just train the therapist, they're not able to provide ongoing training or supervision. They just do the training and they're done. Now, this is important because ongoing staff training and feedback promote company culture and values during staff training. So not only are the staff able to maintain these skills, but when a BCBA goes in and they're training their staff within their company, they're able to start to promote their culture, the company's values, and everything else. So it starts to have that therapist feel like they're kind of at home, and they start to live by the culture and the values that are promoted within the workplace, which then transfer over to the client and the family. And this is really important with our ethical guidelines as well, because it's something that we really value, as well as making sure that our therapists are well trained and that they're getting provided that ongoing feedback, which keeps them up to date in the most recently proved and approved treatment modification procedures. So now we're going to move on to research and parent training. Yay! So there was a study conducted by Gardner in 1972 that analyzed role-playing versus lectures in the training of non-professionals in the application of ABA. And the results showed that role-playing is more effective in training proficiency in real-world applications, while lecture was more effective in training knowledge of ABA principles. So role-playing really was awesome because it means that the parents are able to go home and implement the actual application of these skills. And then the lecture is also really important in our case because when parents are able to learn and understand ABA principles and what we're doing, they're more likely to consent to the services that we're going to be providing or that we would like to provide. They're more likely to implement it in their home as well. They understand where we're coming from and they're like, oh, this is why we use antecedents. This is why we need to reinforce replacements behaviors. This is why we need to use extinction as consequence. And this is just really important overall because it means that there's consistency across settings as well as generalization and maintenance of skills for the client, not just skill-wise, but also behaviorally. Next, there was a study by Adubado, Adams, and Budd in 1981, where a parent was training a spouse using BST, and we wanted to make sure that they wanted to see if this would be an effective training procedure for parent training. The results showed that a parent can effectively train their spouse in ABA applications after receiving training in a clinical setting. So this parent went to the clinic, a clinician trained them using BST to implement a task analysis on, I think it was dressing. And then the parent was then trained in using BST to go home to train their spouse. It was found that it is effective for the parent to learn the skill within the clinic and then to go home and use BST to train their spouse. This was proven to be effective, or supported. And then, nonetheless, was that supported, but this BST that was used to teach this particular task analysis skill was able to generalize across programs. So initially they were trained in dressing, and the parents were able to generalize these skills to feeding and as well to toy play. Now this is really important because it helps the convenience of the family. Oftentimes parents aren't able to make it to parent trainings because of personal reasons, or they do make it to parent trainings and they end up just not implementing it at home because they don't fully understand it. They didn't have enough time to receive feedback and actually practice using these procedures. Now, if they're even able to have both parents go, it's easier to have one parent go rather than both, due to like the time constraints. So it's more convenient for the parents because only one parent has to go, and then they can go home and train their spouse, and then they can both implement all of these procedures for their kids, which is really awesome. And it promotes maintenance and generalization of parent skills and the child skills, which overall benefits everybody. The parents, the child, society, us. It's pretty great overall. To continue with parent training, there was a study by Miles Wilder in 2011 that used behavior skills training to teach parents guided compliance for non-compliant behaviors. The results showed that parents with little to no training in the ABA can be trained using behavior skills training to implement guided compliance. This is really awesome because it helps show that behavior skills training is effective in the implementation and the training for parents in problem behavior treatment programs. So this is awesome because it also means that there's then consistency between the clinical setting or the therapists as well as with the parents at home and in the community, etc. Lastly, there was a study conducted by Jang, Dixon, Tarbox, Grimshay, my CEO, Kornack, and Knocker in 2012. And at my company, we actually used the e-learning, which is what they ended up using in their study. So e-learning is an online tool that is used to teach ABA principles as well as behavior modification procedures. And the results showed that e-learning is an effective tool for parent training and knowledge of ABA principles as well as in implementing behavior modification procedures. So we actually use e-learning for our staff as well as our parents. We use the same videos across both people because they are very well laid out. They use VST, they use video modeling with directive prompts. They go back and they show everything and they talk everybody through everything, and it's really awesome. And the fact that this is a very effective tool really helps the convenience of families that aren't able to make it out to clinical settings because maybe they don't have a car, maybe they just don't have time, or any other reason that they end up coming up with, which is completely understandable. But now they're able to do these e-learning modules at home. They can sit down at 9 o'clock at night, the kids are in bed, they can watch 30 minutes, they can watch 10 minutes, and then they can resume it the next day when they have time. Maybe it's on their lunch break, maybe it's in the morning when they're having coffee and looking at their phone. So this is really important because it allows parents to access parent training in more convenient ways. It's effective and it's a financially feasible option for ABA companies, whereas behavior skills training can be more expensive as well as any of the other kinds of trainings that we've talked about, like GCT and lectures in person and everything else, because that requires hourly pay of the trainer as well as the staff. The parents don't really get paid, but overall, it can be very costly. So there's a lot of cost benefit analysis that was conducted, and it seems that it's most beneficial. So to be brief, we already discussed a variety of historical court cases as well as state and federal laws and principles that have contributed to the need for staff and parent training. The results of staff and parent training can result in increased collaboration and communication between the BCBA staff and parents and all of those people together. It results in consistency, which also results in maintenance and generalization of behavior modification programs, behavior reduction, skill acquisition increases, and behaviors that we want to see overall across our kids, across the clinic setting, the home setting, school, and community settings. It also results in adherence to ethical core principles and values that people within the field of behavior and analysis generally kind of live by. It results in the reductions of neglect and abuse and everything else that I've already kind of mentioned here. For future directions, it was hard to find a lot of research on staff training that focused on reduced rates of abuse and neglect, and I think that that's because we've already come so far within the staff training field and the BACB's requirements of ongoing supervision and continuing education units. For our BCBAs, our staffs are registered behavioral technicians as well as our board certified autism technicians through the BICC. Overall, I think that our staff training has significantly increased. There are some court cases and lawsuits that currently still go over abuse and neglect, but overall it has decreased tremendously from where we were in the 1970s. So a lot of the future directions that I focused on were in parent trainings, and it kind of was based off of the e-learning. A lot of the staff training that I've seen more recently focuses on kind of like FaceTime or webcamming with staff and using behavioral skills training. So I think that maybe the parent trainings can kind of move that direction and use BCBAs early in the morning before parents go to work, or late at night after the kids go to bed, or at some of the more convenient times like a lunch break or something like that, to ensure that parents are able to conveniently get to these trainings and attend with the uh, full attention span that we would like them to. Also, Stocko and Thompson in 2015 mentioned that we should start to work on function-based parent training programs to make sure that when we are implementing parent trainings that they are individualized for parents, and that we conduct functional analysis of the parent's behavior on the implementation of behavior modification or lack thereof their child's programs and treatment programs. I think this would be really great because then we can make it very individualized the way that we do for our treatment programs for our kids, which have been proven to be effective. So that may be something that we want to look into. Overall, writing this paper really opened up my eyes to a variety of ethical implications that I hadn't quite seen before. I learned a lot from it, and the importance of this ongoing staff training and supervision and the documentation of it as well. I think that overall it results in a better or a higher quality of life for our clients. It promotes their autonomy, it respects their dignity, promotes independence, and benefits society as a whole as well. Thank you, and have a good night.